Chapter 11 The Tower of Babel. Unlike the legend of Hermes, the story of the Tower of Babel appears in the Halliwell poem, which shows, if my theory of the origin of that poem be correct, that the legend was not confined at an early period to the English Masons. In the second of the two poems, which I have heretofore said are united in one manuscript, the legend of Babel, or Babylon, is thus given. Footnote. Lines 535 to 550. Ye mow hear, as ye do read, that many years after, for great dread that Noah's flood was all ye run. Footnote. Rain. Anglo-Saxon, rainan, to rain, that Noah's flood would still rain. The Tower of Babylon was begone, also plain work of lime and stone, as any man should take upon 7 mile the height shadwith the sun. King Nebuchadnezzar let it make to great strength for Manus' sake. Footnote. Men's sake. They such a flood again should come over the work it should not nom. Footnote. Get. Should not get over the work. Cover it. For they had so high pride, with strange boast, all that work therefore was lost. An angel smote him so with diverse speech, that never one would that other should reach. Footnote. Say. The statements of this Halliwell legend are very meager, nor is it possible to say with any certainty whence the writer derived his details. From neither the book of Genesis, nor Berosus, nor Josephus could he have derived the information which was given its peculiar form to the legend. The anachronism of making Nebuchadnezzar, who lived about 16 centuries after the event, the builder of the tower, is worthy of notice. It would appear that the writer of the poem had a general acquaintance with the well-known tradition of Babel, and that in loosely giving an account of it, he had confused the time and place of the erection and the supposed name of the builder. At all events, the subsequent Masonic legendists did not accept the Halliwell writer as authority, or more probably, were wholly unacquainted with his poem. It did not exert any influence over the subsequent manuscripts. The next time that the Babel legend appears is in the Cook manuscript, written at least a century after the Halliwell. The legend, as there given, is in the following words. It is written in the Bible Genesis, chapter 1, how that Cam, Noah's son, got Nembroth, and he waxed a mighty man upon the earth, and he was a strong man, like a giant, and he was a great king, and the beginning of his kingdom was the true kingdom of Babylon, and Arak, and Arachad, and Callan. Footnote. The names of cities. And the Lond of Sennaar. And this same Cam, footnote. The word Nembroth has been first written in the manuscript, then erased, and the Cam for Ham inserted. But this correction is itself incorrect and incongruous with the rest of the legend. He gan the tower of Babylon, and he taught to his workmen the craft of measure. Footnote, measure. The author of the manuscript had previously maintained that measure and geometry were identical. So here the craft of measury means the craft of geometry, and geometry was always supposed to be the same as masonry. And he had with him many masons, more than 11,000, and he loved and cherished them well, and it is written in Polychronicon and in the Master of Stories and in other stories more, and this a part witness, the Bible, in the same 10 chapter, where he saith that Assur was Nakain to Nembroth. Footnote, Cam originally written, then erased, and Nembroth inserted. Nembroth went out of the land of Sennaar, and he builded the city Nineveh and Plateus and other more. Thus he saith, de terra illa et de Sennaar, egresus este Assur, et edifivavit Nineveh et Plateus civitates et Cael et Isu, quoque inter Nineveh et hec est civitas magna. Reason requires that we should tell openly how and in what manner that the charges of masoncraft was first founded, and who gave first the name to it of masonry. And ye shall know well that it is told and written in Polychronicon and in Methodus Episcopus and Martyrus that Assur, that was a worthy lord of Sennaar, send to Nembroth the king to send him masons and workmen of craft that might help him to make the city that he was in will to make. And Nembroth send him 3,000 masons, and when they should go and he send them forth, he called them by before him, and said to him, Ye must go to my cousin Assur to help him build a city, but look that ye be well governed, and I shall give you a charge profitable for you and me. And they received the charge of him that was here, there, master, and here Lord, and went forth to Assur, and built the city of Nineveh in the country of Plateus, and other cities more that men call Cael and Izen, that is a great city between Cael and Nineveh. And in this manner the craft of masonry was first preferred, brought forward, and charged for a science. We next meet with the legend in the later manuscripts in a form differing but little from that of the Cook manuscript. The Dowland, which is the earliest of the three manuscript constitutions, and the date of which is supposed to be about the year 1550, has already been printed in this work. But for the convenience of the reader, in comparing the three forms of the legend, so much of it as refers to the BABEL legend is again inserted. It is in these words which, it may be remarked, are very closely followed by all the subsequent manuscripts up to the beginning of the 18th century. At the making of the Tower of Babylon, there was masonry first made much of. And the king of Babylon, that hight Nemroth, was a mason himself, and loved well the science, as it is said, with masters of histories. And when the city of Nineveh and other cities of the east should be made, Nemroth, the king of Babylon, sent thither 60 masons at the rogation of the king of Nineveh, his cousin. And when he sent them forth, he gave them a charge in this manner. And this was the first time that ever masons had any charge of his science. In comparing the 3 forms of the Babylonish legend, which have here been cited, namely, as given in the Hallowell, Cook, and the Dowland manuscripts, we shall readily detect that there was a gradual growth of the details until the legend eventually took the shape which for a long time was accepted by the craft. In the Hallowell poem, the legend is very brief, and by its abrupt termination would impress the opinion upon the reader that masonry had no part in the building of the Tower of Babel, the only effect of which was to produce a confusion of languages and the dispersion of mankind. It was only many years after that the craft of geometry or masonry was taught by Euclid. In fact, the whole tendency of the Hallowell legend is to trace the origin of masonry to Euclid and the Egyptians. In his account of the Tower of Babel, the writer of the Hallowell poem seems to have been indebted only to the scriptural narrative, although he has confounded Nebuchadnezzar, the repairer of Babylon, with Nimrod, its original founder. But the writer of the Cook manuscript took his details of the legend from another source. Only a few years before the composition of this manuscript, Caxton had published, and thus placed in the hands of the English Masons, Trevisa's translation of Ranulph Higdon's Polychronicon, or Universal History. Of this book, rich in materials for legendary composition, the writer of the Cook manuscript readily availed himself. This he honestly acknowledges in several places, and although he quotes as other authorities Herodotus, Josephus, and Methodius, it is very evident that he knows nothing of these historians except from the citations from them made by the monk Higdon in the Polychronicon. The English Masons were probably already acquainted with the legend in the imperfect form in which it is given in the Hallowell poem, but for the shape which it assumed from the time of the composition of the Cook manuscript, and which was adopted in the Dowland and all the later manuscripts, the craft were, I think, undoubtedly indebted to the Polychronicon of the monk of Chester through its translation by Trevisa and its publication by Caxton. There are 2 other forms of the Babylonian legend of later date which must be read before we can thoroughly understand the growth of that legend.